Hi everybody, it's Franny and it's time to get back to the Ferrari. This is the one thing we've been waiting on. This is all the parts we sent out to get plated. So they're back and it's about 20 pounds worth of stuff. This is very well packed. Let me go ahead and open this and see what we got. Before I sent all of these parts out, I had them completely organized and bagged. Now I know they were going to take them out. They have to put them all in pretty much one batch, so they do get all jumbled. It's not the end of the world, but I did ask them to send the actual bags back so I'd have some reference. So they were very sweet. They sent all the old bags back. Now look at this. Look at these goodies. And this is kind of how it comes back. These are all the parts. They're all plated here. Look at that, spacers, washers, nuts, all sorts of things came back. Oh my gosh. All right, and all the bolts here. These are all the suspension bolts. They look absolutely brand new. Wow. These are the anti-sway bars, anti-roll bar covers. So the big gasket goes in there and the bar goes through it. These look great. We have brackets for the brake stuff. So what else we got? Oh yeah, look at this. These are our carriers that go down on the lower suspension arms, and they look absolutely brand new. These are a little pricey if you have to replace them, and we did check them to make sure they didn't have any cracks or anything in them, and all the welds looked good. They weren't bent. That's a huge thing because these could be bent or cracked or whatever if the car was in an accident. These look awesome. Yeah, look at that. Little short guys. Here's the other one. And more of these guys. All right, and our last clamp here. And you're probably looking at this going, that doesn't look like a Ferrari part, neither does that. They're not. Actually, I stole a couple of parts I forgot to get plated for the 3.2 Carrera and threw them in with this batch. This is the rear deck lid latch for the car. And look at that, it looks brand new. All the plating was gone on it. It looked all silver, actually. It didn't stand out the way it should have on the car. So simple enough, just include it in the next batch. So these parts look awesome, but they're not for the Ferrari. My next task will be to organize these into groups for each one of the wheels, because we got so many bolts and so many nuts, and they're all different sizes and different lengths, and that's why I took so many pictures. We also have a lot of spacers that have to be reassembled and kind of grouped up so that we know exactly where everything goes. This is going to take quite a bit of work, but in the long run, it's going to make putting the wheel back together that much easier. I'm going to start by just sort of separating these out. So we've got different lengths, and then we have different heads on these bolts as well. But it's got, the head is much smaller and there's a shoulder on it as well. So they're just very different. So I'm going to lay them all out and try to put this all back together. Next, we're organizing through all the nuts and bolts. And boy, there's a lot of them. There's also a bunch of spacers as well. So these guys, these little Pac-Man-y looking things here, are different thicknesses, and they go in between these carriers here to shim them out a little ways as you put the suspension in. These spacers are all different thicknesses, and I did go through in my notes and measure each one of these before I sent them all off, and that way I can recreate these assemblies as I go. So I'm going to lay them out in terms of thickness, I think, here. What gets me about all this is, how did Ferrari put the cars together on the assembly line in a timely manner? Look at all those bits and all of these little guys, spacers and this and that. Man, it must have taken them forever. They must have really known you're at your station. I'm going to do the front right wheel. I know it takes 3 spacers here, 2 there. This goes there, that goes there. I guess after you've worked there for, a few months or something in a single station, I guess you pretty much know what you're supposed to do, but oof, boy. Well, that's quite a bit of hardware, huh? Now that we have it at least just all laid out, next step is going to be to put it in groups of wheels. So for that, I'm going to need my documentation. Let me go get my laptop. I have tons of pictures on it, and we'll start putting this in groups. With all the parts sorted, I was ready to go put one of the wheels back on the car, but I was watching my own video and at the end I said something like, boy, it was a lot easier to get the steering rack out without the wheels and the center hub and all the suspension on. And I was like, you know what that means? It means this has to go on first. So as I mentioned before, this is a brand new steering rack, so I'm not gonna have to fuss with it at all, which is super sweet. And we just pretty much need to place our clamps on here and get it kind of, you know, they'll still be loose, get them sort of semi-aligned, put the thing back in the car and lock it down. Well, I was all ready to install the steering rack here, but I ran into a small snag. On the back of these, there should be a very thin washer. This thing's super thin. It's only 0.5 millimeter thick, but it's big. It's a big fender washer. It's about 25 millimeters in diameter. And it should be right here on the outside, right here for the nut. Just like that. It's a very thin washer, and I'm guessing they just don't want any chance of moving the block out away from the mounts. That totally makes sense. But you're like, okay, great. Well, what happened? Well, we sent, there were 4 of these, one for each one of these, and we sent all the parts off to get plated and only 2 of them came back. And we've been in contact with the plater trying to figure out what happened to the other 2, but they can't find them. Which is kind of a bummer because I did look them up on the Ferrari parts list and I do have the part number for them, but they're rare in hen's teeth. It's just a kind of a weird washer, I guess, and they're just very hard to find. So my solution is going to be to make some washers. I know that sounds funny, but I ordered a couple of sheets of 0.5 millimeter stainless steel sheet, and I'll just cut one of these things out. Can't be too awfully hard. I know the dimensions and everything, so I'm good there. And I'll just replace them. I do have 2, so what I'm going to do is go ahead and install this, but the easier ones to get to will be the bolts that are sort of on the bottom of the mounts, and I'll leave the washers off of those, and then when I make my new washers, I can just easily pull my bolt back in, just kind of put my new washer on and tighten the whole thing up. I don't want it to stop what I'm doing right now. It's just one of those things, you know. I mean, you send stuff off, you kind of expect it to come back. They also lost a washer and a couple of lock washers. So I do have one washer here. This is just standard number 6 metric hardware, really not that difficult to replace. But they lost one of these and 2 of the lock washers as well. So shoot fire, I'm gonna have to replace those as well. At any rate, let's go ahead and get this steering rack into the car. That's the next thing I want to get done. As I did when I took the steering rack out, I'm going to reinsert it on the left side of the car. That just seemed to work out, was pretty easy. I also ran the steering rack in and out several times to make sure it's exactly centered, because I've got my steering wheel centered, and when I drop the steering column on top of the actual rack here, I want to make sure that we're at least close. We can always adjust it later, but I want to be within the ballpark. So, all right, great. Well, we're just going to throw this thing in actually and mount it to the 2 mounts that are forward here and lock this thing down. Remember when we took the steering rack out, the big problem was this side, was the right side of the car, and this arm was completely loose. It was just wagga, wagga, wagga. So, oh yeah, that's pretty solid. Ooh. These are brand new ball joints on here, so they're actually fairly stiff, which is kind of nice. Yeah, absolutely no noise at all. Oh, that's great, no play whatsoever. We still have the 2 bottom bolts to lock down, but I need to make those washers first. So I'll have to do that, but the rest of it is completely locked down. So our steering column is all but in. So it's super awesome. Our steering rack is back in and it feels great. I'm really happy with the way that went back in. It's super solid too. But look what I've got here. These are the bits for the front right wheel. We've got our axle here, and I went ahead and restored this and painted it and everything. It looks really, really good. And we've got, look at this. This is the new shock here. Pretty sweet, huh? So we sent these off to California to get them rebuilt and refurbished. And they absolutely look brand new. So that's going to be awesome getting those back in. Of course, we've got all of our new hardware here. I guess it's our old hardware, newly plated. I also have these guys here, these ball joints. These are brand new as well. So I'm looking forward to getting all this stuff in the car. I have new tie rod ends as well to go with that wonderful new steering rack too. Pretty sweet, huh? Well, I'm going to cut the video off here. I'm going to get to the wheels in the next video, but I'd like to do the front wheels and probably the back wheels together. So that'd just make this an incredibly long video. So I'll cut it off here. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. Questions or comments, go ahead and leave them down below and I'll get right to them. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, go ahead and do that now. Hit the little bell next to it to be notified because we got all this content coming up. We got to put the wheels back on. We've got a front grille issue. I have other bits underneath the car that we have to work on. That's going to be kind of cool. So you're not going to want to miss any of that. All right. Well, thank you so much for watching. And as always, a very special thank you to our Patreon supporters. Until next time, safe travels. Bye.